don't scroll away just yet. Please sit down with me for a few minutes, because what I'm about to break down isn't just some dry Washington political game. And it's certainly not just more cable news noise. Right now, the head-on collision between the President of the United States and the Chairman of the Federal Reserve is absolutely one of the most consequential standoffs in modern American economic history. And most people haven't even begun to realize what lies beneath the surface. Just this morning, April 15, 2026, Donald Trump went on a live broadcast of Fox Business and told the entire nation that if Jerome Powell doesn't pack his bags when his term expires on May 15, he will step in and fire the head of the Fed directly. His exact words were, "Then I'll have to fire him." Then he revealed a startling detail. He said he had actually wanted to get rid of him long ago, but he just happens to hate being controversial. Listen, everyone. This isn't just a simple matter of human resources. When the leader of a nation publicly threatens to fire the central bank chief on live TV, it is a massive earthquake warning for global financial markets. It is a get-out letter to every foreign government holding U.S. Treasury bonds, and more importantly, it is shaking the very foundation of the most vital economic institution in the free world. I want to tell you the truth. The protagonist of this story isn't actually Powell the person. It is about the survival of an institution that determines whether your mortgage rate remains stable, that protects the purchasing power of the dollars in your pocket, and that stands as a barrier against the kind of hyperinflation that destroys national economies. Now, this institution is being kicked around like a political football. Think of it this way. The Federal Reserve is like the foundation of a massive house. Usually nobody stares at the foundation. Nobody talks about it over dinner. But once that foundation cracks, the walls start to wobble, the roof begins to collapse, and every single person living inside will pay a heavy price. Right now, someone is taking a sledgehammer to that foundation. And we have exactly 30 days to see if it can hold. You must exact 30 days to see if it can outcome, because the details will determine the outcome. Later, we need to focus on that fatal deadline of May 15. Before we dive into these power games, I need to help you sort out the background. Because without context, you can't see the truth. Powell is actually a Republican. He was originally appointed to the Fed board by Obama, but the person who actually elevated him to the chairman's seat was Trump himself. Back in 2017, Trump handpicked him, and back then he couldn't stop praising him. Trump, the Fed do. So what exactly does to put it simply, the Fed's job is to be the stabilizer of the economy. It manages prices, which means your grocery money, gas prices, and rent. It also sets the benchmark interest rates, which in turn affects your mortgage, car loans, and credit card interest. The most critical point is, it must operate independently. This means a president can't just pick up the phone and tell the chairman, "Hey pal, drop those rates right now for my votes." I have a deep understanding of this. Back when I was president, I also worked alongside the Fed boss Alan Greenspan, to be honest. There were times I didn't like what he was doing, and I felt the rates shouldn't move that way. But I understood in my heart, and any clear-headed president understands, that once the world feels the Fed has become a mouthpiece for the White House, the entire financial system will collapse instantly. Markets must believe that monetary policy is based on economic data rather than political pressure. This is the core conflict of the entire story. Trump is now desperately trying to slash interest rates. He wants borrowing costs to drop so that the pressure of servicing national debt is lightened. But Powell has been moving steadily, you could even say conservatively. Since Trump took office, the Fed has already cut rates twice, currently maintaining them between 3.5 and 3.75%. This effort isn't small, but for a president who wants to crush rates down to 1%, it is moving as slow as a snail. This massive gap between demand and professional judgment has been building for over a year. This morning's explosion was just the peak of long-standing resentment. Next, things get even more complicated. Let's break it down step by step, because the truth is often hidden in the details. Just last November, the Department of Justice suddenly launched a criminal investigation into Powell. Officially, it wasn't about monetary policy. They aren't that blatant. Instead, they focused on the $2.5 billion renovation of the Fed headquarters. Trump slammed it as a wasteful boondoggle project. By January of this year, Prosecutor Jeanine Pirro's office issued grand jury subpoenas to the Fed. Powell hit back publicly saying it was pure political persecution. Immediately after the court stepped in, on March 13, a federal judge quashed those subpoenas. The judge stated clearly in the ruling that a mountain of evidence suggested the true purpose of these subpoenas was to pressure the Fed to cut rates. By March 24, The prosecution had to admit, in court, that they found no evidence of misconduct by Powell. On April 3, the judge rejected the DOJ's request for reconsideration once again, but this didn't end there. Just yesterday, April 14, two prosecutors from Piro's A's office actually a surprise raid on the Fed renovation site. Only to be blocked and turned away, the Fed's lawyer Harur firmly told them, "Don't you dare step foot in here again without a lawyer present." Then came the heavy-hitting interview this morning. Trump delivered an ultimatum. If Powell doesn't get out by May 15, he'll be fired. He even insulted Powell on television, calling him an incompetent disaster. But please remember one key point. Back on March 18, Powell held a press conference, stating clearly that he would remain as chair pro tempore. This is legally valid. As long as no successor is confirmed by Congress, he can stay in the job indefinitely. Furthermore, he declared, he will never resign until the DOJ investigation is fully cleared. This has turned into a deadlock. The president is threatening to fire a man who legally might not have to leave at all. Now let's shift from analyzing facts to making a value judgment. We have to ask ourselves, what kind of leadership is this exactly? To be fair, if a government project is truly over budget, it should be investigated. I handled these types of things before. There are dedicated offices like the GAO and Inspector General for that. That is a normal accountability process. Rather than investigating an institution just to destroy it, the current situation is, the president launched a criminal probe into his own appointee. The prosecutors admit there is no evidence, yet he still calls the man a numbskull on TV, and even sends people to harass a construction site the day before threatening a firing, and then he admits he wanted to do this all along. Where is the normal oversight in this? This is clearly a calculated campaign of pressure. The goal is to drive out an independent central bank chief and replace him with someone who will cut rates on command. However, there is still a glimmer of hope in this situation. Republican Senator Thom Tillis stood up, publicly stating he will never vote for any new nominee until the investigation is finished. That is what you call backbone. This kind of internal party check defends the bottom line that criminal investigations cannot be used as political tools. Trump's response was to call Tillis un-American, which sounds more like an outright threat. Then there is the Supreme Court. Back in January, during another case involving a Fed governor, several conservative justices expressed deep skepticism about a president's power to fire a Fed official without cause. That is the judicial system drawing a red line. Democracy functions when people in Congress and the courts are willing to stand up and defend the rules. Let's zoom out a bit. This isn't just a grudge between two men. It is about global confidence in the independence of the American Central Bank. Former Fed Chair Janet Yellen was blunt at a summit in Hong Kong. She said Trump's frantic campaign for lower rates looks like something from a banana republic. She warned that if a government manipulates rates just to save on its own interest payments, historically there is only one result, and that is hyperinflation. Someone of Yellen's stature doesn't just talk nonsense. Look at Argentina. Look at Turkey. Those countries where leaders took control of the central bank watched their currencies collapse while the people suffered. Let's bring it down to earth. If global investors stop trusting independence, they will demand higher yields on trusting the Fed's independence. They will demand higher yields, hedge the risk. The result is that your mortgage interest will go up, your car loan will go up, your retirement account will shrink. Ordinary American families will ultimately pay for this political feud they didn't start. The irony is, even Trump's own Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has changed his tune. He said that because of Middle East tensions causing a spike in inflation in March, the Fed should wait before cutting rates. This means even within the administration, people realize the reality is much more complex than shouting slogans on TV. This pressure is actually a paradox. The harder you push, the less the world trusts you, and interest rates actually won't come down. It is completely counterproductive. If I were to analyze the current political chessboard, you would see that Trump has actually trapped himself. The judicial investigation he launched gave Senator Tillis a reason to block a new nominee. As long as the new nominee is stuck, Powell can legally stay on in a temporary capacity unless Trump uses the nuclear option of a forced firing. But doing so would 100% trigger a constitutional crisis. The case would go to the Supreme Court, and based on previous signals, Trump would very likely lose. For a president wanting to project strength, this would be an absolute humiliation. So you see, the investigation meant to be leverage has become the stone blocking his own path. Regarding the successor, Kevin Warsh, I've met him. He is indeed a professional, but if his chairmanship is bought through a political purge, he will never be able to establish the credibility the Fed relies on to survive. Finally, let's predict the three possibilities moving forward. The first path is a peaceful transition. The Senate approves the nominee, the investigation ends quietly, Powell steps down gracefully, everyone is happy. But this requires Trump to take a step back, which seems unlikely right now. The second path is a standoff, the nomination is blocked. Powell refuses to leave, Trump rants every day, the markets slowly bleed out in this uncertainty. This is the most likely outcome. While not as explosive as a big economy, it is eating away at the foundation of the economy. The third path is a head-on collision. Trump actually fires him. The country enters a constitutional gray zone. Global markets fall into a panic. Foreign governments start dumping U.S. treasuries. This is a lose-lose ending. I personally feel we are sliding toward that second deadlock, but I worry the president's temper could suddenly ignite the fuse for the third scenario. So the next 30 days are absolutely vital. This isn't a drill. This is deciding the economic direction of the years to come. America has survived civil wars and the Great Depression. We survived Watergate and 9/11. We pulled through because someone always chose to protect the system over personal will. At the critical moment, the Fed isn't perfect, but its independence is the final line of defense for the value of the dollar. It protects your savings from being blown away by political winds. Right now, the walls are indeed shaking, but not because the foundation was poorly built. It's because someone is swinging a sledgehammer for selfish reasons. I want to say to everyone, watch your wallet, follow the development of this story. Don't treat it as just another piece of gossip, because the next month will truly change a lot of things. DSK, thank you for listening.